While Jerry was fixing his driveway, he noticed a metal grate he had never seen before. Intrigued, he tugged on it and discovered it was actually a trapdoor. What he found inside was more astonishing than he ever imagined. Without wasting a moment, he grabbed his phone and dialed the police. Jerry's heart raced as he tried to process the information that he had just stumbled upon. Was what he was seeing even real? Would the police buy his story? Shortly after that, Jerry could faintly hear the wailing sirens of the police approaching. Jerry could hear the police entering, and their voices were filled with confusion. In the darkness, he anxiously wished they saw what he knew was hidden down there. However, when they emerged, Jerry found himself in disbelief. What had Jerry discovered in the secret room? Before we start, smash the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. Jerry had been plagued by his disheveled driveway since he first stepped foot in his new home. Despite living there for 3 months, he just never seemed to find the time to spruce it up. The drive was a chaotic mishmash of tools and garden debris from his attempt at landscaping. After procrastinating for a while, he finally mustered up the energy to tackle the task on Sunday. He turned on some 90s tunes and got to work tidying up. However, as soon as he began fixing cracks on the edge of his driveway using cement, he made an exciting discovery. He suddenly noticed something that had previously gone unnoticed. A metal object lodged within the driveway. It resembled a sewer hatch in some ways. Jerry thought it wasn't a big deal and thought about ignoring it completely. However, while Hugh was working on his driveway, he couldn't help but catch sight of the mysterious metal hatch below him. Eventually, he couldn't resist the curiosity any longer and felt compelled to finally uncover the secrets below. As he approached the hatch, he couldn't help but notice its impressive size. It was large enough to accommodate a person. He pondered how he had missed it until now, but it was likely because his driveway used to be so crowded that the ground below was completely out of sight. After clearing away the debris, the hatch became visible. Jerry knelt beside it and attempted to open it again. Although there was no handle, a noticeable line encircled it, giving the impression that it could be open. Unfortunately, the metal was weighty. Jerry needed to come up with an alternative plan. Jerry suddenly recalled seeing a screwdriver somewhere along his driveway. Thankfully, he located it in no time and quickly got to work. With determination, he inserted the screwdriver into the crease and applied all of his strength to push it down. To his great fortune, the hatch finally started to budge. The tip of the screwdriver managed to lift the hatch up a bit. It wasn't much, but it was enough for Jerry to get his fingers underneath. Now, he had to let go of the screwdriver and just hope the hatch wouldn't crush his fingertips. It was a very stressful situation. Luckily, Jerry managed to get his other fingers underneath as well and began to lift the hatch slowly. It was very heavy, and all he could use were his fingertips. As the hatch lifted, Jerry slid his whole hands underneath and was now able to give the hatch a final push. The hatch hit the ground with a bang, and dust puffed up in clouds around it. Jerry had to shield his eyes to avoid the sand, but as soon as everything settled, he looked down. Jerry's eyes widened in shock, and it slowly dawned on him what he was looking at. He had prepared himself for a sewage pipe, but that wasn't at all what he was looking at. Instead, he looked at what seemed like a very long tunnel down under the ground. Jerry carefully peeked over the edge and saw how far down it went. What could be down there? As Jerry looked down below, he also noticed there wasn't a ladder or stairs. He did see a point where once a ladder was attached, but somehow the ladder itself was gone. Jerry knew he had a ladder somewhere in his garage, so he quickly ran inside to look for it. He didn't know if his ladder would be long enough to reach the ground, but he had to try. There was no way he could keep on living his life knowing there could be a secret room underneath his driveway. He quickly walked back and maneuvered his ladder into the tunnel. Suddenly, he heard his neighbor's door opening. "Hi, Jerry," his neighbor happily said. "Oh, hi, Lorraine," Jerry answered. Lorraine was a 70-something-year-old woman who had been living next door long before Jerry was even born. "What do you have there?" she said as she walked up to him. Jerry figured that if there was someone who knew more about this room, it had to be Lorraine. "I found this tunnel under my driveway. Do you know what it could lead to? Maybe the previous owners built it for something?" Jerry hopefully asked. But what she said next surprised him. Lorraine had to think. "I remember one couple who lived there, maybe 20 years ago or so," she finally said. Jerry looked at her, waiting for the rest of her story. "Oh, I have to get the paper. I'm sorry," she continued. Jerry frowned, but then he remembered her memory problems. "All right, I'll talk to you later, Lorraine," he said to his neighbor. He hoped she would be able to tell him more. Now, there was no other option but to go down there himself. He walked back to his garage and grabbed a flashlight, face protection, and a pair of gloves. Jerry wanted to be prepared, hence the gloves and face mask. If the hatch really had been closed for 20 years, who knew what could be down there? He had no desire to get sick from trapped gases and decaying rodent corpses, but he mostly hoped he wouldn't even find those. He put on his face mask and gloves and took one last breath of fresh air. He said a quick prayer and began his descent downward. The ladder stood on the ground all the way down, but since the tunnel was long, it didn't reach the ground Jerry was standing on. Because of this, Jerry had to hang himself down the first few meters before his toes could reach the ladder. His heart was beating hard as he dangled there, desperately trying to find the ladder with his toes. Luckily, he found it, and he managed to descend all the way down. When his feet finally touched the ground, Jerry sighed in relief. He was off that ladder and safely grounded, but everything around him was dark. He grabbed his flashlight and turned it on. In the flashlight's beam, Jerry could see many different kinds of particles floating around, probably dust and sand, but Jerry wasn't sure. As his eyes adjusted, he was stunned by what came into view. Boxes were piled in one corner, a makeshift kitchen in another, and even a crib was tucked behind a table. Carefully, he shuffled through the mess, avoiding obstacles. Putting on gloves, he began moving boxes aside, disturbed by cockroaches darting out from beneath them. He tore open one box, revealing clothing and personal items, likely from the previous owners. Then something unusual caught his attention. Behind the heap of old clothes, he felt the surface of a concealed door. Upon closer inspection, a rusted padlock sealed the entrance. Of course, it wouldn't be easy. He scanned the room and found a sturdy metal rod among the debris. With a determined swing, he struck the padlock. It resisted at first, but eventually gave way with a satisfying snap. He slowly opened the door, revealing only darkness. A long staircase stretched downwards, the air growing colder. The further he descended, the less light reached him. His flashlight's glow revealed strange walls, lined with layered materials and metal sheeting. This wasn't a typical basement. It was fortified. Deeper still, Jerry finally pried open another box. Inside were aged photographs and artifacts that appeared historically significant objects far too important to be hidden in a forgotten underground room. His pulse quickened. He realized he was in over his head. These items didn't belong here. They belonged in a museum. He needed help. He reached for his phone, planning to call the authorities. But there was no signal. Grabbing the artifact-filled box, Jerry knew he couldn't stay underground any longer. The weight of what he'd found pressed heavily on him as he raced back up the stairs. Emerging into daylight, Jerry took his first gasp of fresh air. He dialed 911, the weight of the situation heavy on his shoulders. "You won't believe what I found in my basement," he began, trying to convey the urgency of his discovery. The operator's calm voice cut in, asking if he was in immediate danger. Jerry sensed skepticism. He described the sealed boxes, the reinforced room, and the mysterious contents. Soon, the sound of sirens filled the air. Police arrived quickly, their expressions wary but curious. Jerry led them to the hidden stairwell, watching as they exchanged puzzled glances. Jerry suggested they call in specialists, perhaps from an antiquities unit. The lead officer agreed. As the first box was opened, the tone shifted. Bundles of crisp bills spilled out stack after stack. Shock spread through the room. "This has to be millions," one officer muttered. An official investigation began immediately. The home's history became the focus. Tracing ownership, they discovered the previous owners had mysteriously vanished years earlier. Then a chilling connection emerged. Detectives recalled an infamous bank robbery from 2 decades ago. The culprits were never caught and the money was never recovered. The similarities were striking. What if they were the robbers? One detective asked. Newspaper clippings, old mugshots, and unsolved files were brought in. Everything pointed to the same conclusion. Jerry's basement had been a vault for 2 fugitives hiding in plain sight. The bunker's real purpose became clear. It wasn't just a shelter, it was a fortress for stolen wealth. With mounting evidence, authorities launched a nationwide manhunt. Months passed, but finally a tip led police to a small coastal town. Surveillance footage and witness statements guided them to a quiet cafe. There, the fugitives were arrested without resistance. Age had caught up with them, And so had the law. It was a long time ago, one muttered as they were handcuffed. Their carefully constructed life of lies had unraveled. Meanwhile, Jerry stood in the center of it all, his home the key to a decades-old mystery. With the fugitives in custody and the stolen funds recovered, questions turned to what would become of the bunker. Some joked about turning it into a wine cellar or private theater, but Jerry couldn't ignore the weight of what had happened. The bunker symbolized a dark past, not something to be casually repurposed. In an unexpected twist, the bank awarded Jerry a substantial reward for helping crack the case enough to pay off his mortgage entirely. Holding the check, he felt a mix of disbelief and relief, yet the bunker remained a dilemma. Friends offered suggestions, but none felt right. Night after night, Jerry stood at its entrance, reflecting. Eventually, he made his decision. The secrets had been uncovered. It was time to let the past rest. With the help of contractors, Jerry sealed off the underground space, ensuring its story remained just that, a story, closed and buried where it belonged.